With that story, we now focus on how to deal with the violent behavior in pupils, as well as the red flags parents and teachers should look out for in teenagers. Occupational therapist Nazreen Karim joins us to discuss this further. Nazreen, thank you so much for your time. Before we start talking about the interventions you can put in place, let's talk about the causes. What are some of the causes for the violence and bad behavior we're seeing in schools?
Good morning, Tafuma. Hope you're doing well. So, studies have shown that when we find that children are manifesting with bullying, which resorts to violence, there's usually an underlying emotional, psychological, or a mental condition that might have gone undiagnosed, perhaps overlooked due to a lack of resources or a lack of awareness in this regard. So when we are looking at signs and symptoms of occupational performance, we will find that learners would be affected by this and how it can actually be detected early. We're looking at a lack of concentration span in their schoolwork. We're also looking at a decrease in their grades. We find that many learners are actually struggling to actually get through the tests as well as the school grades as well in terms of being promoted to the next grade, or even just struggling to actually finish their daily tasks and their homework. We also find that children are demotivated to attend school. We find that there are emotional outbursts that happen. We also find that they have a general lack of interest in school, and they start to often experiment with substance abuse, and they start to terrorize learners at school. So these are actual signs which we need to look out for in kids' occupational performance, and that's when we can actually work out, okay, perhaps there might be an underlying condition that may be happening, and it's important to actually take advantage of that when it happens.
Some of the causes of the violence we're seeing in schools is exposure to violence and criminal elements. Some of them are social and economic issues. These are largely out of the control of teachers. So how do teachers try to stem the tide of the violence when there's these larger issues that they have no control of?
Okay, so many schools have actually elected to employ social workers and psychologists, which I feel there's a great need for, because in that case, they are able to really get to the root of the problem. We find that social workers and psychologists can actually sort of dissect the situation and find out, is there something happening at home, or is the learner actually presenting with a mental condition? Often we find that kids that are resorting to violence often suffer from mental conditions such as bipolar, mood disorder. We have depression, we have various conditions that they're actually suffering from, and they often get picked up as just being learners that are perhaps, defiant in terms of their behavior and disobedient. But meanwhile, there is actually a deeply seated emotional issue that is actually happening. But teachers have their hands full, as we know. Teachers have so many learners to deal with, and that's what helps having experts such as a social worker and a psychologist in the school, so that they can actually address the situation and pick up these behaviors the moment they see something is amiss, that they will actually deal with it and really work on intervening before such a tragic situation can manifest itself.
Nazreen, sometimes teachers and parents are oblivious to what these young people are doing on the playground, out on the streets. What are the red flags that you could look for as a parent or a teacher that would show you that, no, something is not right?
Okay, so we know that when teenagers are developing, we know that they are quite hormonal. So often, sometimes when a child starts rebelling, we find that often parents will feel like this is actually just normal teenage behavior. But what we actually are looking out for is we're looking for signs in terms of their occupational performance, such as a decreased interest in self-maintenance. So we're looking at poor self-maintenance. We are looking at inability to complete their school tasks. We are looking at failing grades. We are also looking at constant emotional outbursts. We're looking at temper tantrums, often erratic arguments with parents and outbursts with teachers as well. The moment we start seeing any unstable behavior happening, that's a very important sign to actually pick up that perhaps that learner actually requires intervention. Perhaps something is actually amiss, and perhaps something that school can actually do in terms of intervention for that learner.
Well, Nazreen, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Occupational therapist Nazreen Karim discussing with us spotting and then trying to stem the tide of violence in schools. Still ahead.